Welcome back to Bold Like a Leopard, also known as Razor Sharp Podcast. I am Razor Ray McCoy, and I wanted to give a little bit of an update tonight about Ukraine and really making the case for neutrality for both the United States and any other nation. Obviously, nobody needs to listen to what I say, but I think that in times like these, you have to appeal to reason in order to at least give the hope that somebody will listen. First things first, I do want to encourage you to subscribe on any of the alternative platforms that I have up here. One second. Obviously, that's not here. So you can subscribe to me on Odyssey, Rumble, BitChute, YouTube, Podbean, Gab, Minds, Substack, Telegram, and Getter. So go ahead and do that if you haven't already. Now, to get to our topic, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is not an issue that you can only parse in moral terms. The reality is that I've made the argument in the past two videos that whatever the illegality and the problems in terms of moral justification for the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it doesn't behoove NATO or the West or any other country to get too involved because ultimately this is a dispute that is not really going to benefit either the Russian or Ukrainian people. And even today, there was apparently some sort of statement made by the Russian delegation to the UN that they were invading Ukraine in order to prevent it from arming its nuclear and becoming nuclear again or something. So please don't take what I'm saying here to be a justification of Russian aggression. There are people out there that are being fanboys of Russia and saying, well, they hope Putin wins and whatever. Look, whatever you feel, the reality of the situation on the ground is that Russian troops, Russian aircraft, Russian rockets and artillery, they are destroying civilian centers of population. And those are things that can't be rebuilt. And then on the other hand, you have a lot of war propaganda coming out there that is attempting to portray the Ukrainian side as putting up these heroic efforts that are thwarting the Russians. So I want to address all of those things in this video. The reason that I am making the moral case for neutrality and also the strategic case is because in this case, you do have a very stark contrast in terms of the two belligerents. You have on the one hand Russia. Russia is a country that has hundreds of years of legacy of building empires and subjugating other peoples and expanding all across the Asian and European continents and building amazing monuments to civilization and also many classics of literature and music and everything and obviously like other folk traditions that are very noble. And Russia, of course, has been the conqueror of peoples for many generations, whether it was in Central Asia, whether it was in the Baltic states, whether it was in Siberia. They explored Russia. Sorry, they explored Alaska. Russia did. So those were actions that they show Russia to be a nation that has many very notable accomplishments to its record. Now, Ukraine is a little bit different. I'm not saying that the Ukrainian people are devoid of any accomplishments, but as a nation, as an independent nation, it's much younger because the Ukrainians have been subjugated by so many different occupiers for so many years. Part of the Ukrainian people has been under Polish control or Austrian control, even in the far western part of Ukraine. Obviously, there's another half that's been under Russian control. The people who say that there is no actual Ukrainian people, I think are exaggerating because there is a coherent Ukrainian language. It is distinct from Russian. There's a lot of similarities, but similarities do not make the same thing. And overall, I think that the notion of how similar they are as a people and with different customs and traditions and cultures, it doesn't mean that we have to look at them as the same thing, but we have to look at the tragedy of how it's come to a point where, you know, these two countries are at war, and one of them is clearly trying to dominate the other. So then, why is it not a clear cut imperative that the West support Ukraine with any means possible and thwart the invasion by Russia? Well, the reason for this, and I do want to applaud the president of Brazil, Mr. Jair Bolsonaro, who maintained his neutrality and said, look, we're not going to take Putin's side and we're not going to take Ukraine's side. The reason that that is the smarter tack is because ultimately you do not have necessarily any positive goal coming out of this. You have to remember that this isn't the first time we've had NATO and the West intervene in some way over separatist tensions and of an ethnic nature in Eastern Europe. That happened in Bosnia back in the mid '90s when the Bosniak Muslims were trying to keep the Serbs from dominating them and keeping them within the deteriorating state of Yugoslavia, as well as the Croats, by the way, and the Slovenes. The United States was only too happy to have Yugoslavia fall apart and disintegrate. And while there was a humanitarian justification, the murders of all those Bosniak Muslims in Srebrenica in Bosnia, it was a terrible act on the part of the Bosnian Serbs. It still did not lead to a prosperous outcome for the Bosnians that the Americans intervened. In fact, Bosnia remains sort of a backwater part of Europe, and Serbia remains at odds with the other former parts of Yugoslavia. And I've even seen articles over the past few months that complain about how Serbia is building up its weaponry as if there's some sort of amazingly potent Serb threat in the Balkans. So you can see that even 30 years later, after supposedly the U.S. intervened to do peacekeeping mission in Bosnia and later Kosovo, they're still complaining about what's been happening in Eastern Europe. This is something that people don't understand when they talk about intervention. Intervention lasts much longer than you think that it's going to do. Um, so Serbia, by the way, has signaled its neutrality in the fight with between the West and Russia, or Ukraine and Russia. So think about it this way: that Serbia, which supposedly is Putin's puppet, has said that they are neutral, and therefore, how are we supposed to look at this conflict and say, well, Russia does not deserve to be, confronted by the entire world over this? Because many people would take the reflex reaction and say yes. There's two more factors I wanted to throw in there besides what I just mentioned with Bosnia, which is that once you intervene, you don't know how long you're going to intervene. It could look like only 1 week at the beginning, and then you're there for 20 years. So that's one factor. The second factor that I really want to emphasize is that Russia is being demonized by the entire world, and its organs of communication, its English language network RT and its English language radio station Sputnik. So they've been taken off the air in Europe. Meanwhile, there's been a lot of fake news regarding Ukraine and the war propaganda going on about it. So there are a number of stories that have turned out to be completely untrue. One of them was this Ghost of Kiev the rumor that was spread deliberately by the media, saying that there's this pilot flying around Kiev for the Ukrainian Air Force, and he killed like 6 Russian um, fighter jets in dogfighting engagements. So that turns out to have not been really true, or it's at least unproven. So just take that as one issue that of fake news. Another one was this hyping of the supermodel who, or no, it wasn't a supermodel, it was a beauty pageant contestant as Miss Ukraine, who apparently they were trying to say that, oh, she is taking up arms and wielding an AK-47 against the Russian invasion. That turned out to be incorrect. From what I understand, it was an airsoft rifle. There have been several photos of Ukrainian civilians wielding weapons that, if you look closely at them, they're cardboard cutouts. Now, that doesn't mean that there are not Ukrainians who have been handed weapons and are fighting courageously to defend their homes. And I don't want to disparage the people who are in danger out there, and I don't want to diminish um, the real problem with Russian invasion. I mean, it's not just a problem; it's despicable. Like that Putin would think that he is bettering the life of Russians by invading Ukrainians. So it's the classic desire to get ahead by spiting someone else. It's really something that you can't justify, and nevertheless, the Ukrainian war propaganda is also definitely immoral, and it plays on a lot of American desires to look like we're out there helping the world and policing against threats that potentially could doom humanity. In reality, what we're doing is we're getting deeper into a situation that could actually doom humanity of our own making. Nuclear war, something that's been put on the table a few times in the past few days. The Russians openly preparing for nuclear war. That is, without a doubt, a reason to support neutrality, which is why Bolsonaro, I think, made the right decision. And I think that other nations such as India and China, I think that they know what they're doing. This isn't a moral endorsement of the Russian position, but you cannot just blindly intervene because you hate Vladimir Putin. Whatever the problems with him as a president, his human rights record, the way that he treats his own members of government and people who defy him within his administration, those are all issues that I think we have to put to the side, unfortunately, because we're in a very sensitive situation where potentially billions of lives are at stake. So I don't take that lightly as somebody who is not a pacifist, but generally a non-interventionist. It is very important, though. The last reason that I think we need to talk about neutrality being the correct position is that Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, another figure of pro-Ukraine propaganda, which constantly portrays him as this hero, he is actually pulling a fast one on the Ukrainian people. And maybe they're down with it, maybe they're fine with him doing this, but applied he's applied to join the European Union. I would venture to guess that the Ukrainians as a whole would probably support joining the European Union. That doesn't make it the right decision. And it actually invalidates much of the rationale for supporting Ukraine. One of the main reasons people talk about the need to support Ukraine is because they need to maintain their independence. But if they want to maintain their independence and be free from bullying, they should not drop out. They should not join the EU. I was saying drop out for some reason. It's pretty late. I'm a little fatigued here. I was gonna make another video, but you might see that I'm a little too tired to really be as sharp as I want to be. So I'm going to try to conclude this video by saying that joining the European Union actually is a reason not to support your side. The European Union is not the same as Russia, but it coerces its member states in a different way. Okay, Russia might coerce a member state or a politician or an institution or a business simply by brute force or by talking about how they're going to make that person or organization's life miserable. And that's wrong. And yet, in the European Union, you see more veiled threats that are nevertheless very, destructive to the people that they're made against. The best example I can give is the European Union's debt management program for Greece. And this is, again, we can't talk about this without mentioning that Greece is partly at fault for what's happened to it. The issue is that the remedy for this, joining the EU, and or at least being more active in the EU and allowing the EU to dictate its budgeting decisions and force austerity on its citizens, that is something that you have to consider as to why EU membership is actually a problem. And Greece is far from the only country. There are several countries in Eastern Europe or rather, I think I should say Southern Europe, they have terrible budgetary situations. They've overspent for so many years. They are defaulting on some of their loans, and yet, the European Union allows them to participate in it and be full members on the condition that they subordinate themselves to the European financial banks and institutions, and most centrally Germany, which has the most successful economy in Europe. So, to put it bluntly, you're not really supporting Ukrainian independence if you support the Ukrainian government. I wish it was true. I wish that it was a much more clear-cut decision. It's definitely one that I think will haunt people for years. And I personally would hope that we could get past this conflict through negotiations, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. It's definitely something that President Biden exacerbated, but it's not entirely his fault. You can't absolve Putin of the blame just because NATO and the West have always been, encroaching on him, because at the end of the day, he did have the means to negotiate something without bloodshed, and Putin decided not to do it. And I think that we should condemn what he did, but it doesn't mean that we should take an official side and be supporting one belligerent in this war. That's about it. Please like, share, and subscribe. You can also find my content on those sites that I mentioned at the beginning: Odyssey, Rumble, BitChute, YouTube, Podbean, Gab, Mind, Substack, Telegram, and Getter. And have a wonderful Wednesday. Talk to you later. And peace.